Welcome to the Sleepy Physicist. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Before we begin this gentle journey into one of science's most perplexing debates, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Are you curled up in a quiet bedroom somewhere in Copenhagen, watching the winter evening settle in? Or perhaps you're on a late-night walk through the streets of Tokyo, earbuds in, letting your mind wander. Wherever you are, I hope you're comfortable and ready to drift into one of the most fascinating questions at the edge of human understanding. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Right now, as you listen to these words, there's a heated debate raging in laboratories and lecture halls around the world. It's not about climate change or artificial intelligence, though those are important too. It's about something much closer to home. It's about you, specifically. It's about the very thing that makes you, you. Your consciousness, the quiet awareness that's processing these words right now. The inner voice that's perhaps wondering where this is all leading. Some of the world's most brilliant scientists believe this awareness, this consciousness that feels so intimately yours, might actually be operating according to the strange, almost magical rules of quantum mechanics. The same rules that govern particles so small they can be in two places at once, that can instantly affect each other across vast distances, that seem to exist in a realm where the normal laws of reality simply don't apply. But here's where it gets interesting, and perhaps a little unsettling. Other equally brilliant scientists think this idea is complete nonsense. They argue that consciousness is far too warm, far too wet, far too noisy to dance to quantum rhythms. The debate has been simmering for decades, but recently it's reached a boiling point. New experiments are emerging that seem to support quantum theories of consciousness, while critics are pushing back harder than ever. The stakes couldn't be higher. If consciousness really is quantum, it would revolutionize everything we think we know about the mind, about free will, about what it means to be human. Tonight, we're going to explore this extraordinary scientific split. We'll meet the researchers who believe they found quantum vibrations in the very scaffolding of our brain cells, and the skeptics who insist such ideas belong more in science fiction than serious laboratories. We'll discover why Google's quantum computing division is now investigating consciousness, and why some of the world's leading neuroscientists are beginning to question their most fundamental assumptions about how the mind works. If this keeps you awake tonight, well, at least you'll have learned something profound about the nature of awareness itself. And if you enjoy these slow, contemplative journeys into the deepest questions of science, I'd be grateful if you subscribed or left a like. It truly helps this little channel continue exploring the edges of human knowledge. So settle in, get comfortable. Let your mind relax into the mystery we're about to unfold. Because tonight, we're asking a question that goes to the very heart of what it means to be conscious in a quantum universe. The first thing you need to understand about consciousness is that we don't understand it at all. This isn't scientific modesty. It's a stark acknowledgement that consciousness remains what philosophers call the hard problem. We can map every neuron, measure every electrical impulse, track every chemical cascade in the brain, and yet the fundamental question remains stubbornly unanswered. How does the soft grey matter in your skull give rise to the rich, vivid experience of being you? For most of the 20th century, neuroscientists approached this mystery with confidence. Consciousness, they believed, would eventually be explained through the classical physics of neurons firing, neurotransmitters crossing synapses, and networks of brain cells communicating through electrical and chemical signals. It was just a matter of mapping enough connections, understanding enough pathways. The brain in this view was essentially a biological computer, and consciousness was simply What happened when this computer reached sufficient complexity? This classical approach has yielded remarkable insights. We've learned which brain regions light up during different conscious experiences. We've discovered how anesthetics can switch consciousness on and off. We've mapped the neural correlates of everything from visual perception to moral reasoning. And yet, for all these advances, something crucial has remained missing. The classical view can tell us when consciousness occurs, where it occurs, even what correlates with it. But it struggles to explain why it occurs at all. Why should there be any subjective, inner experience accompanying all this neural activity? Why shouldn't we simply be unconscious biological robots processing information without any accompanying awareness? This is where quantum mechanics enters the picture, bringing with it a set of ideas so strange they seem almost designed to challenge our deepest intuitions about reality. In the quantum world, particles don't behave like tiny billiard balls, following predictable paths. Instead, they exist in what physicists call superposition, simultaneously occupying multiple states until the moment they're observed. An electron can be spinning clockwise and counterclockwise at the same time. A photon can take multiple paths through space simultaneously. Most mysteriously of all, particles can become entangled, their properties remaining mysteriously connected even when separated by vast distances. These quantum phenomena have been verified countless times in laboratories around the world. They're not theoretical speculation. They're the foundation of technologies like quantum computers and MRI machines, but they've always been assumed to operate only at the smallest scales, in the cold, isolated conditions of physics experiments. The brain, with its warm, wet, chaotic environment, seemed like the last place you'd expect to find delicate quantum effects. That assumption began to change in the 1990s when an unlikely pair of researchers proposed one of the most controversial theories in modern science. Roger Penrose, a mathematical physicist who would later win the Nobel Prize for his work on black holes, teamed up with Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist fascinated by the cellular structures within neurons. Together, they developed what they called orchestrated objective reduction theory, or OR for short. Take a moment here to consider how radical this idea really was. Penrose and Hameroff weren't suggesting that consciousness merely resembled quantum mechanics in some metaphorical sense. They were proposing that consciousness literally is a quantum mechanical phenomenon, arising from quantum computations occurring within microscopic structures inside brain cells. The key to their theory lies in something called microtubules. These are tiny hollow cylinders that form part of the structural skeleton of every cell in your body, including neurons. In most cells, microtubules simply provide support and help transport materials around the cell. But Penrose and Hameroff suggested that in neurons, microtubules might be doing something far more extraordinary. They might be quantum computers. According to OR theory, the protein-building blocks of microtubules can exist in quantum superposition, performing vast numbers of calculations simultaneously. These quantum computations are orchestrated by signals from the neuron and from neighbouring microtubules. When the system reaches a critical threshold, the quantum states collapse through a process Penrose calls objective reduction, giving rise to a moment of conscious experience. If this sounds like science fiction, you're not alone in thinking so. When OR was first proposed, it faced a withering barrage of criticism from physicists and neuroscientists alike. The brain, critics argued, was far too warm, wet, and noisy for quantum effects to survive long enough to influence consciousness. Quantum coherence in biological systems was thought to last for tiny fractions of a second, far too brief to affect the relatively slow processes of neural computation. The criticism was led by physicists like Max Tegmark, who calculated that quantum coherence in brain microtubules would collapse in less than a trillionth of a second. From this perspective, suggesting quantum effects in consciousness was like suggesting that soap bubbles could survive in a hurricane. The environment was simply too chaotic for such delicate phenomena to persist. For years, this criticism seemed devastating. Or theory was relegated to the fringes of neuroscience, dismissed by most mainstream researchers as an interesting but ultimately misguided attempt to explain consciousness through exotic physics. Penrose and Hameroff continued to develop their ideas, but they found few allies in the scientific community. But as you listen to this, notice how scientific paradigms can shift in unexpected ways. Because over the past 2 decades, something remarkable has been happening in biology laboratories around the world. Researchers have been discovering quantum effects in living systems, effects that persist far longer than anyone thought possible in warm, wet, noisy biological environments. The first breakthrough came in photosynthesis. Scientists discovered that plants use quantum coherence to capture sunlight with almost perfect efficiency. The energy from absorbed photons doesn't simply bounce randomly from molecule to molecule until it reaches its destination. Instead, it exists in a quantum superposition, simultaneously exploring all possible pathways until it finds the most efficient route. This quantum coherence persists for hundreds of femtoseconds, long enough to guide the energy transfer process. Then came evidence of quantum effects in bird navigation. Many migratory birds possess an internal compass that allows them to navigate using Earth's magnetic field. Research suggests this compass relies on quantum entanglement in proteins within the bird's eyes. Pairs of electrons become entangled, and their quantum states are influenced by magnetic fields, creating a kind of quantum sensor that can detect the planet's magnetic field lines. Even our sense of smell might have a quantum component. Some researchers propose that our noses don't just detect the shape of odour molecules, but also their quantum vibrational frequencies. According to this theory, electrons in our smell receptors can quantum tunnel through odour molecules, and the probability of this tunneling depends on the molecule's vibrational energy. Different vibrations create different smells. These discoveries began to paint a very different picture of biology. Far from being incompatible with quantum effects, living systems seem to have evolved sophisticated mechanisms for harnessing and protecting quantum coherence. If plants could use quantum mechanics for photosynthesis, if birds could use it for navigation, if humans might use it for smell, then perhaps the brain could use it for consciousness. As these ideas were percolating through the scientific community, new experimental evidence began to emerge that seemed to support quantum theories of consciousness. In 2013, researchers at the University of Alberta discovered quantum vibrations in microtubules at room temperature. These weren't the brief, fragile coherences that critics had dismissed, but robust quantum effects that persisted in warm, biological conditions. More recently, studies have shown that anesthetics, the drugs that switch consciousness on and off, seem to bind directly to microtubules. When researchers gave rats drugs that bind to microtubules, it took significantly longer for the animals to fall unconscious under anesthetic. This finding was particularly striking because it suggested that microtubules aren't just passive structural elements, but active participants in the mechanisms of consciousness. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond academic debates about the nature of mind. If consciousness really does have a quantum mechanical basis, it could revolutionize our understanding of anesthesia, our approach to treating consciousness disorders, and even our conception of what it means to be human. But the story doesn't end there. As quantum theories of consciousness have gained experimental support, they've also attracted attention from some unexpected quarters. Google's Quantum Artificial Intelligence Lab, led by Hartmut Neven, has begun exploring whether quantum computers could help us understand consciousness. Neven has proposed experiments that would entangle human brains with quantum processors, testing whether participants report richer conscious experiences when their neural activity is coupled with quantum systems. The idea sounds like something from a science fiction movie, but Neven argues that we're entering a new era in consciousness research, one where bold hypotheses and interdisciplinary methods could lead to revolutionary breakthroughs. His team is exploring whether quantum effects in anesthesia might provide a window into the quantum nature of consciousness, building on the growing body of evidence that consciousness and quantum mechanics might be intimately connected. Yet even as experimental support for quantum consciousness grows, the scientific community remains deeply divided. Critics continue to argue that the brain's warm, wet environment is fundamentally incompatible with quantum coherence. They point out that while quantum effects have been found in some biological systems, these effects are typically very specific, highly localized, and evolved for particular functions. Consciousness, they argue, is too complex and too distributed throughout the brain to depend on such delicate quantum phenomena. The debate has become particularly intense around something called integrated information theory, or IIT, developed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi. IIT proposes that consciousness arises when information becomes highly integrated across different parts of a system. According to IIT, consciousness isn't about quantum mechanics at all, but about the mathematical relationships between different information processing components in the brain. IIT has gained significant support from neuroscientists who find its mathematical framework compelling and its predictions testable. A major study, funded by the Templeton Foundation, recently tested IIT against other consciousness theories using advanced brain imaging techniques. The results showed partial support for IIT's predictions, suggesting that consciousness might indeed be related to information integration rather than quantum mechanics. This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of the current scientific split over consciousness. It's not simply a matter of one theory being right and another being wrong. Instead, we're witnessing a fundamental disagreement about what kind of phenomenon consciousness actually is. Is it a classical information processing system that emerges from complex neural networks? Is it a quantum mechanical process occurring in the microscopic structures of brain cells? Or is it something else entirely, something that our current scientific frameworks aren't equipped to understand? As you contemplate these questions, consider how they might relate to your own experience of consciousness. Right now, as you listen to these words, you're experiencing something that science is still struggling to explain. The thoughts flowing through your mind, the sense of being present in this moment, the feeling of being you rather than someone else. These experiences remain among the deepest mysteries in all of science. The scientific split over quantum consciousness reflects our broader uncertainty about the nature of mind and reality. Some researchers believe that consciousness will ultimately be explained through the classical physics of neural computation, just as soon as we understand enough about brain networks and information processing. Others are convinced that consciousness requires a fundamentally new kind of physics, one that bridges the gap between the quantum world of particles and the subjective world of experience. What makes this debate so compelling is that both sides are backed by serious scientists with impressive credentials and growing experimental evidence. The quantum consciousness researchers can point to discoveries of quantum effects in biological systems, to correlations between anesthetics and microtubules, to the persistent failure of classical theories to explain the hard problem of consciousness. The classical consciousness researchers can point to decades of progress in neuroscience, to the successful mapping of neural correlates of consciousness, to the implausibility of quantum coherence in the brain's chaotic environment. This is where we find ourselves today, suspended between two radically different visions of what it means to be conscious. In one vision, consciousness is an emergent property of classical neural computation, no more mysterious than the weather patterns that emerge from atmospheric dynamics. In the other vision, consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, as basic as space and time, manifesting through quantum processes that connect mind and matter in ways we're only beginning to understand. The resolution of this debate could reshape not just neuroscience and psychology, but our entire conception of human nature. If consciousness is quantum, it might suggest that free will is more than an illusion, that the mind can genuinely influence physical reality, that the boundary between self and universe is more porous than we imagine. If consciousness is classical, it might reinforce our understanding of humans as sophisticated biological machines, operating according to the same physical laws that govern everything else in the universe. As we continue our exploration of this scientific split, we'll delve deeper into the experimental evidence on both sides. Meet the researchers pushing the boundaries of consciousness science, and consider what these discoveries might mean for the future of human understanding. Because whether consciousness turns out to be quantum or classical, one thing is certain. The journey to understand it is revealing profound truths about the nature of reality itself. Truths about the nature of reality itself. But here's something that might surprise you as you consider this debate. The most compelling evidence for quantum consciousness isn't coming from theoretical physics or philosophical arguments. It's emerging from the most practical corner of medicine imaginable: operating rooms. Dr. Stuart Hameroff first noticed something peculiar about anesthesia during his early career as an anesthesiologist in the 1970s. Patients would slip from consciousness to unconsciousness with a precision that seemed almost impossibly clean. One moment they were fully aware, chatting with nurses, feeling anxious about their surgery. The next moment, they were completely absent, their consciousness seemingly switched off like a light. But where had that consciousness gone? And more puzzlingly, how did such tiny amounts of anesthetic gas manage to shut down something as complex as human awareness? What troubled Hameroff was that anesthetics didn't seem to work the way other drugs worked. Most medications target specific receptors, like keys fitting into particular locks, but anesthetics appeared to work on almost everything. They affected proteins throughout the brain, yet somehow produced the very specific effect of eliminating consciousness while leaving basic life functions intact. It was as if consciousness had a kind of master switch that could be flipped, rather than being a gradual emergent property of neural complexity. As Hameroff delved deeper into this mystery, he began focusing on the cellular structures within neurons themselves. While most neuroscientists studied the electrical signals jumping between brain cells, Hameroff became fascinated by what was happening inside each individual neuron, and that's where he encountered microtubules. Picture, if you will, the interior of a neuron. It's not empty space, but rather a bustling microscopic city filled with molecular machinery. Among the most prominent structures are microtubules, hollow cylinders about 25 nanometers in diameter. Built from proteins called tubulins, these structures form the cell's skeleton, providing shape and helping transport materials around the neuron. But to Hameroff, they looked like something else entirely. They looked like biological computers. Each microtubule contains thousands of tubulin proteins arranged in a precise geometric pattern. Each tubulin can exist in multiple conformational states, like molecular switches that can be on or off. Hameroff realized that if these switches could interact with each other, microtubules might be capable of information processing far more sophisticated than anything happening at the level of neural networks. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. When Hameroff began investigating how anesthetics affected microtubules, he discovered something remarkable. Anesthetic molecules seem to bind directly to specific sites on tubulin proteins. Even more intriguingly, when anesthetics bound to microtubules, they appeared to disrupt the very information processing that Hameroff suspected might be related to consciousness. This discovery led to a series of experiments that have become central to the quantum consciousness debate. Researchers found that when they gave laboratory animals drugs that specifically bind to microtubules, it took significantly longer for the animals to become unconscious under anesthesia. It was as if the microtubule binding drugs were somehow protecting consciousness from the effects of anesthetic gases. Take a moment to consider what this might mean. If consciousness really were just a product of neural networks and synaptic activity, then drugs affecting the internal structures of individual neurons shouldn't have such dramatic effects on anesthesia. But if consciousness depends on quantum processes within microtubules, then these findings begin to make perfect sense. The evidence became even more compelling when researchers discovered that anesthetics affect different isotopes of the same gas in slightly different ways. Isotopes are versions of atoms that have the same number of protons but different numbers of neutrons. Chemically, they're nearly identical, yet xenon-129 has a slightly different anesthetic potency than xenon-131. The only significant difference between these isotopes is their quantum mechanical properties, their nuclear spin states. This isotope effect provided something that had been missing from quantum consciousness theories: a smoking gun. If consciousness were purely a classical phenomenon, there would be no reason for different isotopes of anesthetic gases to have different effects. But if consciousness involves quantum processes, then the different quantum properties of isotopes could indeed affect their anesthetic potency. As you absorb these ideas, notice how they challenge some of our most basic assumptions about the relationship between mind and matter. We're accustomed to thinking of consciousness as something that emerges from the complex interactions of billions of neurons. But these findings suggest that consciousness might actually depend on quantum processes occurring within individual brain cells, processes so delicate that they can be disrupted by the subtle differences between atomic isotopes. The implications extend far beyond anesthesia. If microtubules really are quantum processes, and if consciousness really does depend on quantum coherence within these structures, then consciousness isn't just an emergent property of neural complexity, it's a fundamental feature of how matter organizes itself at the quantum level. This perspective received a significant boost in 2022, when researchers at Trinity College, Dublin, published results that seemed to support the quantum nature of consciousness through an entirely different approach. Instead of studying anesthetics or microtubules, they investigated whether human brains might be capable of quantum computation in general. The Dublin team used a technique called proton magnetic resonance to observe the behaviour of protons in brain tissue. They found that these protons seemed to become entangled, maintaining quantum correlations that lasted far longer than classical physics would predict. When they compared brain tissue from conscious patients to tissue from patients under anesthesia, they discovered that consciousness was associated with much stronger and longer-lasting quantum entanglement. But perhaps even more intriguing were the connections they found between quantum entanglement in the brain and cognitive performance. Patients who showed stronger quantum correlations in their brain tissue also performed better on tests of memory, attention, and decision-making. It was as if quantum coherence wasn't just correlated with consciousness, but with the quality of conscious experience itself. These findings dovetailed with earlier work by physicist Matthew Fisher at UC Santa Barbara, who had proposed that quantum effects in the brain might be protected by specialized molecules. Fisher suggested that phosphorus nuclei in certain brain chemicals could maintain quantum coherence for remarkably long periods, potentially serving as biological qubits that enable quantum computation in neural tissue. The phosphorus hypothesis was particularly elegant because it solved one of the major criticisms of quantum consciousness theories. Critics had long argued that the brain's warm, wet environment would destroy quantum coherence almost instantaneously. But Fisher showed that phosphorus nuclei have unique properties that could protect them from decoherence for minutes or even hours, more than enough time to influence neural processes. As these discoveries accumulated, they began to attract attention from some of the world's most advanced technology companies. Google's quantum AI division, led by Hartmut Neven, announced that they would begin investigating consciousness using their quantum computers. Neven proposed experiments that sounded like science fiction, entangling human brains with quantum processors to test whether consciousness might have quantum properties. The Google experiments would work by having human participants wear specialized headsets that could monitor their brain activity while simultaneously connecting their neural signals to quantum computers. The quantum computers would be programmed to mirror or enhance certain patterns in the participant's brain activity. If consciousness really is quantum, Neven reasoned, then participants should report richer or more vivid conscious experiences when their brains are coupled with quantum systems. Neven's approach represented a fundamentally new way of studying consciousness. Instead of just observing neural activity or testing the effects of drugs, researchers would actually be manipulating quantum states and measuring their effects on subjective experience. It was the kind of experiment that could provide definitive evidence for or against quantum theories of consciousness. But as these quantum consciousness experiments gained momentum, they also faced increasingly sophisticated criticism from neuroscientists who remained convinced that consciousness could be explained through classical physics alone. The criticism centered around something called integrated information theory, or IIT, which had emerged as perhaps the most mathematically rigorous alternative to quantum theories of consciousness. IIT was developed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi, who proposed that consciousness arises not from quantum mechanics, but from the integration of information across different parts of the brain. According to IIT, any system that integrates information in sufficiently complex ways, will be conscious to some degree. Consciousness, in this view, is a measure of how much integrated information a system contains. What made IIT particularly compelling to many neuroscientists was its mathematical precision. Unlike quantum consciousness theories, which often remain somewhat vague about specific mechanisms, IIT provided exact equations for calculating the amount of consciousness in any given system. It made testable predictions about which brain networks should be active during conscious experience and how consciousness should change as brain connectivity changes. The theory also had some surprising implications. According to IIT, consciousness isn't limited to brains. Any system that integrates information could potentially be conscious. This included certain types of computer networks, some bacterial colonies, and even theoretical systems with no biological components whatsoever. Consciousness in Tononi's framework was a fundamental property of information integration itself. A major test of IIT came in 2023 when researchers funded by the Templeton Foundation conducted the largest consciousness study ever attempted. They used multiple brain imaging techniques to monitor 256 human participants as they transitioned between consciousness and unconsciousness under anesthesia. The goal was to test the predictions of IIT against those of competing theories, including quantum consciousness models. The results were fascinating and somewhat surprising. 2 out of 3 of IIT's main predictions were confirmed. When participants lost consciousness, there was indeed a measurable decrease in information integration across brain networks. Certain brain regions that IIT predicted would be crucial for consciousness did show the expected activity patterns, but the results weren't completely clear-cut. Some aspects of the data seemed to support quantum theories as well, particularly regarding the timing and coordination of neural activity across different brain regions. As you consider these competing theories, notice how they represent fundamentally different ways of understanding what you are. If IIT is correct, then your consciousness is essentially a measure of how effectively different parts of your brain integrate information. The richer your conscious experience, the more integrated information your brain contains. Your sense of being a unified self emerges from the mathematical relationships between different information processing systems in your head. If quantum consciousness theories are correct, then your awareness depends on delicate quantum processes occurring in the microscopic structures within your brain cells. Your thoughts and experiences arise from quantum computations that follow the strange, non-local rules of quantum mechanics. Your consciousness might be fundamentally connected to the quantum fabric of reality itself. But there's a third possibility that's beginning to emerge from the scientific split over consciousness. Some researchers are starting to suggest that both classical and quantum processes might be involved in consciousness, but in different ways and at different levels of organization. This hybrid approach was pioneered by researchers like Pentti Heikkinen, who proposed that consciousness might involve quantum processes at the cellular level that give rise to classical information processing at the network level. In this view, quantum coherence in microtubules might provide the computational power necessary for complex information integration, while the integration itself follows classical principles. The hybrid approach gained support from studies of brain networks during different states of consciousness. Researchers found that conscious states were characterized by both quantum-like correlations at short timescales and classical information integration at longer timescales. It was as if the brain were using quantum processes to enhance its classical computational abilities. This perspective received additional support from studies of meditation and altered states of consciousness. Experienced meditators showed unusual patterns of brain activity that seemed to involve both enhanced quantum coherence and increased information integration. During deep meditative states, participants' brains displayed quantum correlations that lasted significantly longer than in ordinary consciousness, while simultaneously showing increased connectivity between brain regions that normally operate independently. The meditation studies were particularly intriguing because they suggested that consciousness might not be a fixed property, but something that could be enhanced or modified through practice. If consciousness really does involve quantum processes, then techniques that increase quantum coherence in the brain might actually expand the quality or depth of conscious experience. But even as evidence for quantum effects in consciousness continued to accumulate, critics remained unconvinced. The most persistent criticism came from computational neuroscientists who argued that quantum theories were unnecessarily exotic explanations for phenomena that could be understood through classical means. These critics pointed out that while quantum effects had indeed been found in some biological systems, these effects were typically very specific and evolved for particular functions. The quantum coherence in photosynthesis, for example, only persists because plants have evolved specialized protein structures that protect quantum states from environmental decoherence. The brain, critics argued, showed no evidence of having evolved similar protective mechanisms for consciousness-related quantum processes. Moreover, critics noted that quantum consciousness theories still faced what they called the binding problem. Even if individual microtubules could maintain quantum coherence, there was no clear mechanism for coordinating quantum states across the billions of neurons in the brain. Consciousness seems to be a unified phenomenon, but quantum consciousness theories struggle to explain how quantum processes in different parts of the brain could work together to create this unity. The binding problem led some researchers to propose more radical versions of quantum consciousness theories. Physicist Henry Stapp suggested that consciousness might be fundamental to quantum mechanics itself, that the act of conscious observation actually causes quantum wave functions to collapse into definite states. In Stapp's view, consciousness wasn't produced by quantum processes in the brain. Instead, consciousness was what made quantum mechanics work in the first place. This interpretation connected quantum consciousness to some of the deepest puzzles in physics. Quantum mechanics had always been troubled by what physicists call the measurement problem. Quantum systems seem to exist in superposition until they're measured, but what exactly constitutes a measurement? Stapp proposed that conscious observation was the key. Consciousness didn't emerge from quantum processes. Quantum processes required consciousness to function. As these ideas developed, they began to attract attention from philosophers and theologians, as well as scientists. If consciousness really is fundamental to quantum mechanics, then mind might not be just an emergent property of matter. Instead, matter and mind might be two aspects of a more fundamental reality, one in which consciousness plays a central role in shaping the physical world. But as you listen to these extraordinary ideas, it's important to remember that they remain highly speculative. The scientific consensus is still developing, and many of these theories lack the kind of experimental support that would convince most researchers. The quantum consciousness debate is far from settled, and it's entirely possible that the ultimate explanation for consciousness will involve principles we haven't yet discovered. What's certain is that the debate is pushing the boundaries of both neuroscience and physics in unprecedented ways. Researchers are developing new experimental techniques, new theoretical frameworks, and new ways of thinking about the relationship between mind and matter. Whether consciousness turns out to be quantum or classical, the investigation is revealing profound truths about the nature of reality itself. If you find yourself drawn to these deep explorations of consciousness and reality, members of our community get access to extended episodes, like this one, 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready, but for now, let's continue our journey into this fascinating scientific split. As we venture deeper into this mystery, we'll explore the latest experimental evidence, meet the researchers who are designing the next generation of consciousness studies, and consider what these discoveries might mean for our understanding of free will, personal identity, and the nature of human experience. Because whatever consciousness turns out to be, the quest to understand it is teaching us something profound about what it means to be aware in a quantum universe. The story of quantum consciousness is still being written, and you're witnessing one of the most important scientific debates of our time. A debate that could reshape not just neuroscience and physics, but our entire conception of what it means to be human. As we stand at this fascinating crossroads between mind and quantum mechanics, something extraordinary is beginning to emerge from laboratories around the world. It's not just that scientists are finding quantum effects in biological systems. It's that they're discovering these effects in the very places where consciousness seems to flicker into being. Consider for a moment the delicate dance happening inside your brain right now. While you've been listening to these ideas about quantum consciousness, trillions of molecular interactions have been taking place within your neurons. Some of these interactions, according to recent research, might be following quantum mechanical rules rather than the classical physics we once assumed governed all biological processes. In 2024, a groundbreaking study published in the journal Physics of Life Reviews provided what researchers called the strongest evidence yet for quantum processes in brain tissue. The study, led by researchers at the University of Alberta, used sophisticated spectroscopy techniques to observe what they termed superradiance in networks of tryptophan molecules found within microtubules. Now, superradiance is a quantum phenomenon where molecules become synchronized in their energy emission, creating coherent light in a way that classical physics cannot explain. What made this discovery so remarkable was that it occurred at body temperature in wet, noisy biological conditions where quantum effects were thought to be impossible. The researchers found that these quantum effects weren't random or accidental. They appeared to be enhanced by the warm, chaotic environment of living tissue rather than destroyed by it. It was as if evolution had somehow learned to harness quantum mechanics for biological purposes, turning what should have been destructive noise into constructive coherence. But here's what makes this discovery particularly intriguing for consciousness research. The quantum superradiance occurred specifically in networks of tryptophan molecules, the same amino acid that's involved in the production of serotonin, one of the brain's most important neurotransmitters for mood and consciousness. The researchers couldn't help but notice that these quantum effects were happening in the exact molecular pathways that seem most closely linked to conscious experience. As you contemplate this connection between quantum mechanics and the chemistry of consciousness, consider how it might change our understanding of mental states. If consciousness really does depend on quantum processes involving neurotransmitter precursors, then the boundary between mind and matter becomes far more permeable than we ever imagined. This permeability is exactly what intrigues researchers like Dr. Anirban Bandyopadhyay at the National Institute for Materials Science in Japan. Bandyopadhyay has spent the past decade studying what he calls quantum orchestration in biological systems. His work suggests that consciousness might not be localized in any particular part of the brain, but rather emerges from quantum correlations that span across multiple scales of organization. In Bandyopadhyay's experiments, he's found evidence that microtubules can maintain quantum coherence across remarkably long distances and time periods. When he stimulates microtubules in one part of a neural network, he observes instantaneous responses in microtubules located in completely different brain regions. These responses happen faster than any classical signal could travel between the neurons, suggesting that quantum entanglement might be connecting brain structures in ways we never suspected. The implications are staggering. If Bandyopadhyay is correct, then your brain isn't just a collection of individual neurons communicating through chemical and electrical signals. It's a quantum network where information can be shared instantaneously across vast neural distances through entanglement. Your thoughts, emotions, and experiences might emerge from this quantum web rather than from localized processing in specific brain regions. But as compelling as this research appears, it's important to recognize that we are still in the early stages of understanding these phenomena. The quantum effects that researchers are observing are real and measurable, but their connection to consciousness remains largely speculative. We must be cautious about drawing definitive conclusions from correlations, no matter how intriguing they might be. This caution is particularly important when we consider the work being done at companies like Cambridge Quantum Computing, which has begun investigating whether artificial quantum systems might be capable of consciousness. Their researchers are designing quantum computers that mimic some of the quantum processes observed in brain tissue, testing whether these systems might exhibit something resembling awareness or subjective experience. The experiments are still in their infancy, but early results suggest that quantum computers can indeed exhibit some properties that seem consciousness-like. They can process information in ways that appear to involve something resembling choice or decision-making. They can maintain coherent states while simultaneously exploring multiple possibilities. Most intriguingly, they seem to exhibit what researchers call quantum creativity, generating solutions to problems that weren't explicitly programmed into their systems. Of course, whether this constitutes genuine consciousness or merely sophisticated information processing remains hotly debated. Critics argue that these quantum computers are simply following deterministic algorithms, no matter how complex or quantum their operations might be. But proponents suggest that the same criticism could be applied to biological consciousness. How do we know that human awareness is anything more than sophisticated biological computation? This question brings us to one of the most profound implications of quantum consciousness research. If consciousness really is a quantum phenomenon, then the traditional distinction between artificial and natural intelligence might be far less meaningful than we assumed. A quantum computer that exhibits consciousness-like properties might be conscious in exactly the same way that a human brain is conscious. The possibility has attracted attention from philosophers as well as scientists. David Chalmers, one of the leading philosophers of consciousness, has suggested that quantum theories might help solve what he calls the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem isn't explaining how the brain processes information or responds to stimuli. It's explaining why there's any subjective, inner experience accompanying these processes at all. Chalmers argues that if consciousness is indeed quantum, then subjective experience might be a fundamental feature of reality rather than something that emerges from complex information processing. In this view, consciousness doesn't arise from matter. Instead, consciousness and matter are two aspects of a more fundamental quantum reality. This perspective resonates with some interpretations of quantum mechanics that suggest consciousness plays a fundamental role in physical reality. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics has puzzled physicists since the theory's inception. Quantum systems seem to exist in superposition until they're measured, but what constitutes a measurement remains unclear. Some interpretations suggest that conscious observation is what causes quantum wave functions to collapse into definite states. If this interpretation is correct, then consciousness isn't just produced by quantum processes. Consciousness is what makes quantum mechanics work in the first place. Mind and matter are so intimately connected that neither can be understood without the other. But as fascinating as these ideas might be, it's crucial to remember that they remain highly speculative. The relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics is still being investigated, and many of these theories lack the experimental support needed for scientific consensus. We must approach these ideas with both openness and skepticism, appreciating their potential while acknowledging their limitations. What's certain is that the investigation is yielding remarkable discoveries about both consciousness and quantum mechanics. Researchers are developing new experimental techniques that can probe quantum effects in biological systems with unprecedented precision. They're creating new theoretical frameworks that bridge physics and neuroscience in innovative ways. Most importantly, they're asking fundamental questions about the nature of reality that could reshape our understanding of what it means to be conscious beings in a quantum universe. Take a moment here to notice how these ideas might resonate with your own experience of consciousness. As you listen to these words, you're experiencing something that science is still struggling to explain. The thoughts flowing through your mind, the sense of being present in this moment, the feeling of being you rather than someone else. These experiences might be manifestations of quantum processes that connect your consciousness to the deepest levels of physical reality. The quantum consciousness debate has also begun to influence our understanding of altered states of consciousness. Researchers studying meditation, psychedelic experiences, and other non-ordinary states of awareness have found patterns that seem consistent with quantum theories of consciousness. Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris at Imperial College London has conducted groundbreaking studies of consciousness under the influence of psychedelic compounds like psilocybin and LSD. His research suggests that these substances don't simply add something to consciousness. Instead, they seem to reduce the brain's normal filtering mechanisms, allowing access to quantum processes that are usually suppressed or ignored. Using advanced brain imaging techniques, Carhart-Harris has shown that psychedelic experiences are associated with increased quantum-like correlations between brain regions that normally operate independently. The stronger these correlations, the more profound and meaningful participants rate their experiences. It's as if psychedelics provide a window into the quantum substrate of consciousness, revealing aspects of awareness that are normally hidden from ordinary experience. Similar patterns have been observed in experienced meditators. Long-term practitioners of contemplative disciplines show unusual brain activity patterns that include enhanced quantum coherence and increased connectivity between regions associated with self-awareness, attention, and emotional regulation. During deep meditative states, their brains display quantum correlations, that can persist for minutes rather than the microseconds typically observed in ordinary consciousness. These findings suggest that consciousness might not be a fixed property, but something that can be enhanced, expanded, or modified through various practices and experiences. If consciousness really does involve quantum processes, then techniques that increase quantum coherence in the brain might actually deepen or enrich conscious experience. But the implications extend beyond individual consciousness to questions about the nature of reality itself. If our awareness is fundamentally quantum, then the boundary between observer and observed, between mind and world, might be far more fluid than classical physics suggests. This fluidity is precisely what interests researchers at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, who have been investigating whether consciousness might be able to influence physical systems through quantum mechanisms. Their experiments test whether human intention or attention can affect the behavior of quantum systems like random number generators or sensitive electronic devices. The results of these studies remain controversial and are not widely accepted by the mainstream scientific community. Some experiments have shown small but statistically significant effects, suggesting that consciousness might indeed be able to influence physical systems in subtle ways. Other studies have failed to replicate these effects, leading critics to argue that any observed influences are likely due to experimental artifacts or statistical anomalies. What's particularly challenging about this research is that it pushes against some of our most basic assumptions about the relationship between mind and matter. Classical physics suggests that mental states can only affect the physical world through the movements of our bodies. But if consciousness is quantum, then direct mind-matter interactions might be possible through quantum entanglement or other non-local effects. The controversy surrounding these experiments reflects deeper tensions within the scientific community about the nature of consciousness itself. Researchers who favour classical theories of consciousness tend to be skeptical of any claims about direct mind-matter interaction. Those who favour quantum theories are more open to the possibility, though they remain divided about the mechanisms and significance of such effects. As these debates continue, new experimental approaches are emerging that might help resolve some of these controversies. Researchers at universities around the world are designing more sophisticated tests of quantum consciousness theories, using advanced technologies like quantum computers, precision measurement devices, and artificial intelligence to probe the relationship between mind and quantum mechanics. One of the most ambitious projects is being conducted at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where researchers are attempting to create what they call hybrid quantum biological systems. These systems combine living brain tissue with quantum computers, allowing researchers to test whether biological consciousness can directly interact with artificial quantum systems. The preliminary results are intriguing but inconclusive. The hybrid systems do show unexpected behaviours that seem to emerge from the interaction between biological and artificial components. But whether these behaviours constitute evidence for quantum consciousness or simply reflect complex information processing remains unclear. Similar experiments are being conducted at research institutions in Europe, Asia, and North America, each approaching the question of quantum consciousness from a slightly different angle. Some focus on the cellular mechanisms within individual neurons. Others investigate network-level phenomena that might involve quantum correlations between different brain regions. Still others explore the possibility that consciousness might involve quantum field effects that extend beyond the physical boundaries of the brain itself. As you consider these diverse approaches to understanding consciousness, Notice how they reflect different ways of thinking about what you are. Each theory implies a different relationship between your inner experience and the physical world around you. Each suggests different possibilities for how consciousness might develop, change, or interact with other conscious beings. The quantum consciousness debate is ultimately about more than just scientific theories or experimental results. It's about the fundamental nature of human experience and our place in the cosmos. If consciousness is quantum, it suggests that we are far more intimately connected to the universe than classical physics would suggest. Our awareness might be woven into the very fabric of reality, participating in the quantum processes that govern matter and energy at the deepest levels. But even if consciousness turns out to be purely classical, the investigation is revealing extraordinary truths about the complexity and sophistication of biological information processing. The human brain, whether quantum or classical, remains one of the most remarkable systems in the known universe, capable of generating the rich, vivid experience of being conscious. As we continue our exploration of this scientific split, we'll delve deeper into the latest experimental evidence, meet more of the researchers who are pushing the boundaries of consciousness science, and consider what these discoveries might mean for our understanding of free will, personal identity, and the future of human consciousness itself. The story of quantum consciousness is still being written, and the next chapters promise to be even more remarkable than what we've discovered so far. Whether consciousness turns out to be quantum or classical, the journey to understand it is teaching us profound truths about the nature of reality and our place within it. But there's another dimension to this debate that we haven't yet fully explored. As researchers probe deeper into the quantum nature of consciousness, they're uncovering connections that extend far beyond individual brains. Some of the most intriguing recent discoveries suggest that consciousness might not be confined to the boundaries of individual minds, but could involve quantum correlations that link multiple conscious beings together. Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has conducted a series of experiments investigating what he calls quantum interconnectedness between human participants. In these studies, pairs of individuals who have never met are placed in separate electromagnetically shielded rooms. One person is shown emotional images while their brain activity is monitored. Remarkably, the other person's brain often shows corresponding changes at exactly the same moments, despite having no sensory contact with their partner. The effect is subtle but statistically significant across hundreds of trials. When one person's brain responds to an emotional stimulus, their partner's brain shows similar activation patterns milliseconds later. The correlation appears strongest in areas of the brain associated with emotional processing and attention, suggesting that some form of information transfer might be occurring between the participants. Radin proposes that this information transfer might occur through quantum entanglement. If consciousness really does involve quantum processes, then it's possible for the quantum states in one person's brain to become entangled with the quantum states in another person's brain. When the entangled states in one brain change, the correlated states in the other brain would change instantaneously, regardless of the physical distance between the individuals. This interpretation remains highly speculative and is not accepted by most mainstream scientists. Critics argue that the observed correlations could be explained by subtle environmental cues, statistical artifacts, or experimental biases. However, the experiments have been replicated by independent research groups, and the effects persist even under highly controlled conditions designed to eliminate conventional explanations. If these findings are valid, they suggest that consciousness might be far less individualized than we typically assume. Rather than being isolated islands of awareness, our minds might be interconnected through quantum processes that transcend the boundaries of our physical brains. This interconnectedness might be normally below the threshold of conscious awareness, but could become apparent under certain conditions or with specific training. The idea resonates with the reports from experienced meditators and contemplatives throughout history, who have often described experiences of expanded awareness that seem to transcend individual identity. In deep meditative states, practitioners frequently report a sense of unity or connection with other beings, with nature, or with the universe as a whole. If consciousness is quantum, these experiences might reflect genuine perceptions of quantum interconnectedness, rather than mere subjective illusions. Some researchers have begun investigating whether contemplative practices might enhance quantum correlations between individuals. Studies of synchronized meditation groups have found unusual patterns of brain activity that seem to involve coherent oscillations across multiple participants. When experienced meditators practice together, their brainwaves often become synchronized in ways that exceed what would be expected by chance. These group coherence effects have been observed in communities of transcendental meditation practitioners, Buddhist monks, and other contemplative groups. The synchronization appears strongest during periods of deep focused meditation and can persist for minutes or even hours. Some researchers suggest that this coherence might involve quantum entanglement between the participants' brains, creating a kind of collective consciousness that emerges from individual awareness. The implications of such findings would be revolutionary for our understanding of human nature and social interaction. If consciousness really can become quantumly entangled between individuals, it might explain phenomena like intuitive communication, emotional contagion, and the sense of connection that people often feel with loved ones or community members. But we must approach these ideas with appropriate caution. The research on quantum interconnectedness and consciousness remains preliminary and controversial. While the experimental results are intriguing, they require replication and further investigation before we can draw definitive conclusions about their significance. What's certain is that the quantum consciousness debate is pushing us to reconsider some of our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of mind and reality. Whether consciousness turns out to be quantum or classical, the investigation is revealing extraordinary complexities in the relationship between awareness, brain function, and physical reality. As we near the end of our exploration tonight, it's worth reflecting on how this scientific split over consciousness might influence the future of human understanding. If quantum theories prove correct, they could revolutionize not just neuroscience and psychology, but our entire conception of what it means to be human. They might point toward new possibilities for enhancing consciousness, treating mental illness, and understanding the connections between mind and universe. Even if classical theories ultimately prevail, the quantum consciousness debate has already enriched our appreciation for the sophistication and mystery of biological information processing. The human brain, whether quantum or classical, remains an extraordinary system capable of generating the rich, complex experience of being consciously aware. The debate has also fostered new collaborations between physicists, neuroscientists, philosophers, and contemplatives, creating interdisciplinary conversations that might not have emerged otherwise. These collaborations are generating fresh insights and innovative experimental approaches that benefit consciousness. research regardless of which theoretical framework ultimately proves most accurate. Perhaps most importantly, the quantum consciousness debate reminds us that consciousness remains one of the deepest mysteries in science. Despite centuries of investigation and remarkable technological advances, we still don't fully understand how subjective experience arises from physical processes. This mystery keeps us humble in the face of the extraordinary phenomenon of awareness itself. As you settle into the quiet moments after this exploration, you might find yourself more aware of your own consciousness, more attentive to the subtle qualities of your inner experience. Whether that awareness emerges from classical neural networks or quantum processes in microtubules, it remains one of the most remarkable features of existence, deserving of both scientific investigation and personal appreciation. The scientific split over quantum consciousness will undoubtedly continue to evolve as new experimental evidence emerges and theoretical frameworks develop. But regardless of how the debate resolves, the journey to understand consciousness is teaching us profound truths about the nature of reality and our place within it. If you find yourself drawn to these deep explorations of the mysteries that connect mind and matter, you might enjoy our previous episode on quantum entanglement, where we explored Einstein's famous objection to spooky action at a distance, and how modern experiments have vindicated the strange predictions of quantum mechanics. It's called Quantum Entanglement Explained, why Einstein called it spooky, and you can find it in the description below or among our recent uploads. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey into one of science's most fascinating debates. Whether consciousness proves to be quantum or classical, the fact that we can contemplate such questions at all remains one of the most extraordinary features of being aware in this mysterious universe. Until next time, sleep well and dream deeply. As this debate continues to unfold, something rather unexpected has begun to emerge from the intersection of quantum consciousness, research and contemplative practice. Researchers studying meditation and other consciousness-altering disciplines have started to discover patterns that seem to echo some of the quantum phenomena we've been exploring tonight. Dr. Judson Brewer at Brown University has spent years investigating what happens in the brain during deep meditative states. Using advanced neuroimaging techniques, his team has observed something curious. During profound states of meditative absorption, experienced practitioners show brain activity patterns that bear striking resemblances to quantum coherence, affects neural oscillations that normally operate independently begin to synchronize across vast distances in the brain, creating what Brewer describes as large-scale coherent networks that persist far longer than classical neural dynamics would predict. But here's what makes these findings particularly intriguing. The coherence patterns observed during deep meditation don't seem to follow the usual rules of neural communication. Instead of information traveling along established pathways between brain regions, the synchronization appears to emerge simultaneously across multiple areas, as if different parts of the brain were somehow directly connected rather than communicating through intermediate steps. Now, this remains a speculative interpretation, not a proven scientific fact. The mechanisms underlying these observations are still being investigated, and the connection to quantum processes remains hypothetical. But the patterns are consistent enough to suggest that contemplative practices might provide a unique window into the quantum substrate of consciousness, if such a substrate exists. Consider, as you listen, how this might relate to your own moments of deep focus or quiet awareness. Have you ever experienced that peculiar state where thoughts seem to settle into stillness, where the usual chatter of mental activity gives way to a more unified sense of presence? If consciousness does involve quantum processes, these states might represent periods when quantum coherence in the brain becomes more pronounced, creating the subjective experience of expanded awareness. The meditation research has also revealed something else that connects to our earlier discussion of quantum entanglement. When experienced practitioners meditate in groups, their brain waves often become synchronized in ways that exceed statistical probability. The synchronization isn't limited to people sitting next to each other. It can occur between individuals separated by considerable distances within the same space, and sometimes even between people in different locations entirely. Dr. Lynn McTaggart, who has conducted extensive research on what she calls group intention, has documented numerous instances where synchronized meditation groups show coherent brain activity patterns that seem to transcend individual boundaries. Her study suggests that under certain conditions, the quantum fields associated with individual consciousness might begin to overlap and interact, creating a kind of collective awareness that emerges from but transcends individual minds. Again, we must emphasize that these interpretations remain highly speculative. The observed synchronization could result from subtle environmental cues, shared rhythms in breathing or movement, or other classical mechanisms, but the persistence and precision of the effects have led some researchers to consider whether quantum entanglement might play a role in group consciousness experiences. This possibility takes on additional significance when we consider reports from contemplative traditions around the world. Across cultures and centuries, practitioners have described experiences of expanded awareness that seem to transcend individual identity. During deep states of meditation or prayer, many people report a sense of connection with other beings, with nature, or with the universe as a whole. If consciousness does have a quantum foundation, these experiences might reflect genuine perceptions of quantum interconnectedness rather than mere subjective illusions. The boundaries we normally experience between self and other, between inner awareness and outer world, might be constructs that emerge at the classical level of experience, but break down when consciousness accesses its deeper quantum nature. Take a moment here to reflect on any experiences you might have had of feeling deeply connected to something larger than yourself, perhaps during a quiet walk in nature, a moment of profound silence, or an experience of unconditional love. If quantum consciousness theories prove accurate, these moments might represent glimpses into the fundamental interconnectedness that underlies all existence. The contemplative research has also shed new light on the relationship between attention and quantum processes. Studies of focused attention meditation show that practitioners can learn to maintain coherent brain states for extended periods, suggesting that consciousness might have the capacity to stabilize and direct quantum processes through sustained awareness. Dr. Michael Mrazek at UC Santa Barbara has found that attention training through meditation produces measurable changes in brain network connectivity that persist long after formal practice sessions end. More intriguingly, these changes seem to involve the same brain regions that show quantum-like correlations in other consciousness studies. It's as if training attention also trains the brain's quantum coherence systems, though this interpretation remains unproven. The attention research connects to a broader question about the relationship between free will and quantum mechanics. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then the apparent randomness of quantum events might provide a mechanism for genuine choice and creativity that transcends deterministic causation. Some philosophers and physicists have suggested that quantum indeterminacy could be the source of free will, allowing conscious beings to influence physical reality through quantum processes. This idea remains highly controversial and lacks scientific consensus, but it offers a potential solution to one of the oldest puzzles in philosophy. How can we have genuine choice in a universe governed by physical laws? Dr. Henry Stapp, a quantum physicist at UC Berkeley, has proposed that conscious intention might directly influence quantum wave function collapse, providing a mechanism by which mental states could affect physical reality. According to Stapp's interpretation, consciousness doesn't just observe quantum processes, it actively participates in determining their outcomes. This is clearly speculative territory, far beyond what current scientific evidence can support. But the speculation is grounded in serious attempts to understand how quantum mechanics might relate to subjective experience. If consciousness is quantum, then the traditional separation between mind and matter becomes far more porous than classical physics suggests. The free will implications extend to questions about creativity and insight. Many artists, scientists, and inventors have described breakthrough moments where new ideas seem to arrive fully formed, as if from nowhere. If consciousness involves quantum processes, these moments of inspiration might reflect quantum tunneling events in neural networks, allowing thoughts to leap across conceptual barriers that would be insurmountable through classical information processing. The composer Mozart famously described hearing entire symphonies in his mind as complete wholes rather than sequences of individual notes. The mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan claimed that mathematical theorems were revealed to him in dreams by a Hindu goddess. The physicist Niels Bohr dreamed of sitting on the sun with electrons orbiting around him, leading to his model of atomic structure. Whether these accounts reflect quantum processes in consciousness or simply illustrate the remarkable capabilities of classical neural networks remains an open question. But the frequency of such reports across different domains of human creativity suggests that consciousness might have access to information processing modes that transcend ordinary logical reasoning. The creativity research has practical implications as well. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then techniques that enhance quantum coherence might also enhance creative and cognitive abilities. Some researchers have begun investigating whether specific meditation practices, breathing techniques, or other consciousness-altering methods might optimize brain function by promoting quantum coherence. Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon who reported profound consciousness experiences during a coma, has collaborated with researchers to investigate whether altered states of consciousness might provide access to enhanced information processing capabilities. While his claims remain controversial and unproven, they point toward possibilities that warrant further scientific investigation. The practical applications of quantum consciousness research extend beyond individual enhancement to questions about healing and therapeutic intervention. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then approaches that work with these processes might offer new avenues for treating mental illness, trauma, and other conditions affecting awareness. Some preliminary studies have investigated whether quantum coherent light therapy, magnetic field treatments, or other approaches targeting quantum processes might affect consciousness and mental health. The results remain inconclusive, and much more research is needed before any clinical applications could be considered. But the theoretical framework suggests new directions for exploring the relationship between consciousness and therapeutic intervention. As you contemplate these possibilities, notice how they might change your relationship to your own mind and awareness. If consciousness really does connect us to quantum reality, then every moment of awareness becomes an encounter with the deepest levels of existence. Your thoughts, emotions, and experiences aren't just personal phenomena. They might be expressions of universal quantum processes that connect you to the cosmos itself. The therapeutic implications also extend to our understanding of mental illness and consciousness disorders. If quantum processes are involved in consciousness, then conditions like schizophrenia, depression, or Alzheimer's disease might involve disruptions in quantum coherence rather than just classical neural dysfunction. Dr. Stuart Hameroff has suggested that anesthetics work by disrupting quantum processes in microtubules, which could explain why these drugs can switch consciousness on and off so precisely. If this interpretation is correct, then other consciousness-affecting substances might also work through quantum mechanisms, opening new avenues for understanding and treating mental health conditions. Some researchers have begun investigating whether the therapeutic effects of psychedelic compounds might involve quantum processes. These substances produce profound alterations in consciousness that seem to transcend ordinary neural explanations. Users often report experiences of unity, interconnectedness, and expanded awareness that sound remarkably similar to the quantum consciousness phenomena we've been exploring. Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris has found that psychedelics reduce activity in what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a collection of brain regions associated with self-referential thinking and ego boundaries. As this network quiets down, users report dissolution of the sense of separate self and increased feelings of connection with others and the universe. If consciousness involves quantum processes, psychedelics might work by reducing the classical neural activity that normally obscures quantum effects, allowing access to deeper levels of quantum awareness. This interpretation remains highly speculative, but it offers a framework for understanding how such small amounts of these substances can produce such profound changes in consciousness. The psychedelic research also connects to broader questions about the nature of reality and perception. If our ordinary consciousness is limited by classical neural processes, then altered states might provide glimpses of aspects of reality that are normally filtered out or ignored. This possibility has implications for our understanding of mystical and spiritual experiences throughout history. Rather than dismissing these experiences as hallucinations or delusions, quantum consciousness theory suggests they might reflect genuine perceptions of quantum interconnectedness and non-local awareness. The connection between consciousness and quantum reality might also explain why contemplative practices often lead to ethical and spiritual insights. If consciousness really does connect us to universal quantum processes, then deep states of awareness might naturally give rise to feelings of compassion, wisdom, and moral clarity. Many meditation practitioners report that sustained practice leads not just to personal benefits, like reduced stress or increased focus, but to a genuine sense of connection with all life. If these experiences reflect quantum interconnectedness, they might provide a scientific foundation for ethics based on fundamental interdependence rather than abstract philosophical principles. But as we explore these profound possibilities, it's important to maintain appropriate scientific skepticism. The connections between quantum mechanics, consciousness, and spiritual experience remain largely speculative. While the research is intriguing and suggestive, we must be careful not to draw conclusions that exceed what the evidence can support. The quantum consciousness debate is ultimately about more than scientific theories or experimental results. It's about the fundamental nature of human experience and our place in the cosmos. Whether consciousness proves to be quantum or classical, the investigation is revealing extraordinary truths about the complexity and mystery of awareness itself. If you find yourself drawn to these explorations of the deepest questions of existence, you might particularly appreciate our extended episodes where we can dive even deeper into these profound mysteries. Members of our community get access to these longer journeys, 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready, but for now, let's continue our exploration of what these discoveries might mean for the future of human understanding. As quantum consciousness research continues to develop, it's beginning to influence fields far beyond neuroscience and physics. Computer scientists are investigating whether quantum computers might achieve consciousness through artificial quantum coherence. Engineers are exploring whether quantum sensors might detect consciousness in patients who appear unresponsive. Philosophers are reconsidering fundamental questions about the nature of mind and reality. The interdisciplinary nature of this research reflects the scope of the questions involved. Understanding consciousness requires insights from physics, biology, psychology, philosophy, and contemplative traditions. No single discipline has all the tools necessary to solve this profound mystery. This collaborative approach is already yielding new insights and unexpected connections. Physicists are learning from neuroscientists about the complexity of biological information processing. Neuroscientists are discovering new ways to think about consciousness through quantum mechanical analogies. Contemplatives are finding scientific frameworks for understanding experiences that have been described in spiritual traditions for millennia. The convergence of these different approaches suggests that we may be approaching a new synthesis in our understanding of consciousness. Whether this synthesis will be quantum or classical remains to be seen, but the integration of multiple perspectives is already enriching our appreciation for the depth and complexity of awareness itself. As you rest in these final moments of our exploration, take time to notice the quality of your own awareness, the consciousness that has been following these ideas, weighing these possibilities, wondering about these implications. This awareness itself remains one of the most extraordinary features of existence, regardless of whether it emerges from classical or quantum processes. The quantum consciousness debate reminds us that consciousness is not something we simply have, like an object or possession. Rather, consciousness is something we are, the very medium through which we encounter and engage with reality. Whether that medium operates according to classical or quantum principles, it deserves our deepest respect and most careful investigation. The future of consciousness research promises to be even more remarkable than what we've explored tonight. New experimental techniques are being developed that can probe quantum processes in biological systems with unprecedented precision. Advanced brain imaging technologies are revealing patterns of neural activity that were previously invisible. Quantum computers are reaching levels of sophistication that might make artificial consciousness a real possibility. But perhaps most importantly, the investigation itself is changing how we think about what it means to be conscious beings in a quantum universe. Whether consciousness proves to be quantum or classical, the journey to understand it is teaching us profound truths about the nature of reality and our place within it. The scientific split over quantum consciousness reflects deeper questions about the relationship between mind and matter, between subjective experience and objective reality, between the individual and the universe. These questions have puzzled philosophers and scientists for centuries, and they continue to challenge our most fundamental assumptions about existence itself. As we conclude our gentle journey through this fascinating debate, remember that you are witnessing one of the most important scientific investigations of our time. The questions being asked and the discoveries being made could reshape not just neuroscience and physics, but our entire understanding of what it means to be human. Whether consciousness turns out to be quantum or classical, the fact that we can contemplate such profound questions at all remains one of the most remarkable features of being aware in this mysterious cosmos. The very ability to wonder about the nature of our own awareness, to investigate the mechanisms of our own consciousness, to question the relationship between mind and reality. These capacities themselves are among the greatest mysteries we're trying to solve. Thank you for joining me on this quiet exploration of consciousness and quantum mechanics. If tonight's journey has sparked your curiosity about the strange world of quantum physics, you might enjoy our previous exploration of quantum entanglement, where we delved into Einstein's famous objection to spooky action at a distance and discovered how modern experiments have vindicated quantum mechanics' most counterintuitive predictions. It's called Quantum Entanglement Explained, why Einstein called it spooky, and you can find it among our recent episodes. Until next time, rest well in the mystery of your own awareness. And remember that whether consciousness is quantum or classical, the fact that you can ponder these questions at all is one of the most extraordinary features of being conscious in this remarkable universe. Sweet dreams. As our exploration of quantum consciousness winds toward its conclusion, we find ourselves at a particularly intriguing crossroads. The evidence we've examined tonight, from microtubule quantum vibrations to the mysterious effects of anesthetics, from Google's quantum consciousness experiments to the meditation studies showing unusual brain coherence patterns, all point towards something profound. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this scientific split isn't the debate itself, but what it reveals about the evolving nature of scientific understanding. Consider how dramatically our view of biology has shifted in just the past few decades. 20 years ago, the idea that living systems could harness quantum effects seemed preposterous. The biological world was warm, wet, and chaotic, the antithesis of the cold, isolated conditions where quantum phenomena were thought to survive. Yet here we are, with mounting evidence that life has not only learned to tolerate quantum effects, but to exploit them with remarkable sophistication. This shift in perspective reflects something deeper about how science progresses. The most revolutionary discoveries often emerge not from confirming what we expect, but from challenging our most fundamental assumptions. When researchers first observed quantum coherence in photosynthesis, they weren't trying to prove that plants were quantum computers. They were simply trying to understand how energy transfer could be so remarkably efficient. The quantum explanation emerged because classical physics couldn't account for what they were observing. The same pattern appears throughout the consciousness research we've explored tonight. Stuart Hameroff wasn't initially seeking to prove quantum theories of consciousness when he began studying anesthetics. He was simply puzzled by how these drugs could switch consciousness on and off with such precision. The quantum interpretation emerged because classical explanations seemed inadequate to explain the phenomena he observed. This brings us to a crucial point about the nature of scientific controversy. When scientists disagree, it's often not because some are being stubborn or closed-minded, it's because different pieces of evidence point in different directions, and our theoretical frameworks haven't yet evolved enough to accommodate all the observations. Take a moment here to reflect on how this applies to your own understanding. As you've listened tonight, you may have found yourself drawn to some explanations more than others. Perhaps the quantum theories resonated with your intuitive sense that consciousness is something special, something that transcends mere mechanical computation. Or maybe the classical theories felt more grounded, more consistent with everything else we know about how brains work. Both responses are perfectly valid. Science isn't about choosing sides based on what feels right. It's about following the evidence wherever it leads, even when that path takes us to uncomfortable or counterintuitive destinations. The quantum consciousness debate also illustrates something profound about the relationship between different scales of organization in nature. At the quantum level, particles exist in superposition and can be entangled across vast distances. At the molecular level, proteins fold into complex shapes and interact through precisely choreographed chemical reactions. At the cellular level, neurons fire in patterns that somehow give rise to thoughts and experiences. At the systems level, networks of brain regions coordinate to produce unified conscious experience. Each of these scales operates according to its own principles and follows its own patterns. The challenge for consciousness researchers is understanding how phenomena at these different levels might relate to each other. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, how do quantum effects in microtubules relate to the electrical activity of neurons? How do neural networks give rise to subjective experience? How does individual consciousness connect to the broader patterns of reality? These are what scientists call bridging problems, and they represent some of the most challenging questions in all of science. We're remarkably good at understanding individual levels of organization, but we struggle to understand how different levels connect and influence each other. The bridging problem is particularly acute for consciousness because subjective experience seems to exist at a different level of description entirely from physical processes. When you experience the redness of a rose or the sound of music, that subjective quality doesn't seem reducible to patterns of neural firing or quantum processes in microtubules. There appears to be an explanatory gap between physical processes and subjective experience that our current scientific frameworks haven't yet learned to bridge. This gap has led some philosophers and scientists to suggest that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of reality, like space and time, rather than something that emerges from complex information processing. In this view, consciousness doesn't arise from matter. Instead, consciousness and matter are two aspects of a more fundamental reality that we don't yet fully understand. The panpsychist interpretation, as it's sometimes called, suggests that all matter has some rudimentary form of consciousness, and that complex consciousness emerges when these basic conscious elements are organized in sufficiently sophisticated ways. If this view is correct, then the quantum consciousness debate might be asking the wrong question. Instead of wondering whether consciousness arises from quantum processes, we might need to ask how quantum processes and consciousness co-evolve as aspects of the same underlying reality. But panpsychism remains highly speculative and lacks empirical support. Most scientists prefer to work with more conventional assumptions about the relationship between mind and matter, at least until extraordinary evidence demands extraordinary theoretical revisions. As you contemplate these profound questions, notice how they touch on some of the deepest mysteries of existence. What does it mean to be conscious? How does subjective experience relate to physical reality? Are we fundamentally separate from the universe we observe, or are we intimately connected to it in ways we're only beginning to understand? The quantum consciousness research suggests that these questions might have surprising answers. If consciousness really does involve quantum processes, then the boundary between mind and matter becomes far more permeable than classical physics suggests. Your thoughts and experiences might be manifestations of the same quantum fields that govern the behavior of particles and energy throughout the cosmos. This perspective has profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe. Rather than being isolated biological machines processing information in our heads, we might be expressions of universal consciousness manifesting through quantum processes that connect us to the deepest levels of reality. But even if consciousness turns out to be purely classical, the investigation itself has revealed extraordinary truths about the sophistication and mystery of biological information processing. The human brain remains one of the most complex systems in the known universe, capable of generating the rich, vivid experience of being aware. The research has also fostered unprecedented collaboration between disciplines that rarely interact. Physicists are working with neuroscientists, philosophers are collaborating with computer scientists, and contemplatives are sharing insights with laboratory researchers. These interdisciplinary conversations are generating fresh perspectives and innovative approaches that benefit consciousness research, regardless of which theoretical framework ultimately proves most accurate. One of the most significant developments has been the emergence of what researchers call contemplative neuroscience, the scientific study of meditation, mindfulness, and other consciousness-altering practices. This field has revealed that consciousness isn't a fixed property, but something that can be trained, enhanced, and modified through various techniques. Studies of long-term meditation practitioners have found structural changes in brain regions associated with attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. These changes aren't just temporary effects that disappear when people stop meditating. They represent lasting alterations in brain structure and function that persist for years or even decades. The contemplative research has also revealed that different meditation practices produce different patterns of brain activity and different subjective effects. Focused attention practices strengthen networks involved in sustained attention and cognitive control. Open monitoring practices enhance metacognitive awareness and emotional balance. Loving kindness practices increase activity in regions associated with empathy and social cognition. These findings suggest that consciousness has a kind of plasticity similar to the brain's ability to reorganize itself in response to learning and experience. Just as physical training can strengthen muscles and improve coordination, contemplative training appears to strengthen certain aspects of consciousness and improve the quality of subjective experience. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then contemplative practices might work by optimizing quantum coherence in the brain. The enhanced focus, emotional balance, and sense of interconnectedness that many practitioners report might reflect improved quantum information processing rather than just changes in classical neural networks. This interpretation remains speculative, but it's consistent with reports from contemplatives throughout history who have described expanded states of awareness that seem to transcend ordinary conscious experience. These states often involve feelings of unity, timelessness, and direct insights into the nature of reality that are difficult to explain through classical neuroscience alone. The contemplative research has practical implications as well. If we can understand how meditation and other practices enhance consciousness, we might develop more effective approaches to education, therapy, and human development. We might learn to cultivate wisdom and compassion more systematically, and to access creative and intuitive capacities that remain largely untapped in ordinary experience. Some researchers have begun investigating whether contemplative practices might offer insights into the nature of consciousness itself. If experienced meditators can access expanded states of awareness, they might be able to report on aspects of consciousness that are normally below the threshold of ordinary experience. This approach treats contemplatives as research instruments who can provide first-person data about the nature of consciousness that complements third-person scientific observations. The combination of subjective reports from experienced practitioners and objective measurements from neuroscientists might reveal patterns and principles that neither approach could discover alone. The contemplative approach also connects to broader questions about the role of consciousness in scientific investigation itself. Every scientific observation ultimately depends on conscious awareness. Scientists use consciousness to design experiments, interpret data, and develop theories. If we don't understand consciousness, do we really understand the foundations of scientific knowledge itself? This question has led some philosophers of science to suggest that understanding consciousness might be essential for understanding the nature of scientific knowledge. If consciousness really does involve quantum processes, then the act of conscious observation might play a more fundamental role in scientific investigation than we've traditionally assumed. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics has puzzled physicists for decades. Quantum systems seem to exist in superposition until they're measured, but what constitutes a measurement remains unclear. Some interpretations suggest that conscious observation plays a crucial role in determining measurement outcomes, though this view remains controversial and lacks scientific consensus. If consciousness is involved in quantum measurement, then every scientific observation becomes an interaction between conscious awareness and quantum reality. The traditional separation between objective reality and subjective observation breaks down, and science becomes a collaborative enterprise between mind and matter rather than a one-way investigation of passive objects by detached observers. These ideas remain highly speculative and are not accepted by most scientists. The mainstream view is that measurement in quantum mechanics doesn't require consciousness, just interaction with macroscopic systems that amplify quantum effects into classical outcomes. But the questions raised by quantum consciousness research continue to challenge our understanding of the relationship between mind and reality. As we near the end of our exploration, it's worth reflecting on how these questions might influence the future of human understanding. Whether consciousness proves to be quantum or classical, the investigation is revealing profound truths about the nature of awareness and its relationship to physical reality. If quantum theories prove correct, they could revolutionize not just neuroscience and psychology, but our entire conception of what it means to be human. They might point toward new possibilities for enhancing consciousness, understanding mental illness, and exploring the connections between individual awareness and universal reality. Even if classical theories ultimately prevail, the quantum consciousness debate has already enriched our appreciation for the depth and complexity of biological information processing. The human brain, whether quantum or classical, remains an extraordinary system capable of generating the rich, complex experience of being consciously aware. The debate has also reminded us that consciousness remains one of the deepest mysteries in science. Despite remarkable advances in neuroscience and impressive technological capabilities, we still don't fully understand how subjective experience arises from physical processes. This mystery keeps us humble in the face of the extraordinary phenomenon of awareness itself. Perhaps most importantly, the investigation has revealed that consciousness deserves serious scientific attention. For too long, consciousness was dismissed as too subjective, too elusive, or too unscientific to warrant rigorous investigation. The quantum consciousness debate, regardless of its ultimate resolution, has established consciousness as a legitimate and important scientific question. The tools and techniques developed for consciousness research are already finding applications in other fields. Brain imaging methods developed to study consciousness are being used to understand creativity, decision-making, and social cognition. Computational models of consciousness are informing artificial intelligence, research, and robotics. Meditation research is influencing approaches to education, therapy, and stress reduction. The interdisciplinary collaborations fostered by consciousness research are generating insights that extend far beyond the original questions physicists are learning about biological complexity. Neuroscientists are discovering new ways to think about information processing. Philosophers are engaging with empirical evidence in unprecedented ways. These broader impacts ensure that consciousness research will continue to flourish regardless of how specific debates about quantum theories resolve. The field has established itself as an essential part of our scientific understanding of mind, brain, and reality. As you rest in the quiet moments after our exploration, take time to appreciate the extraordinary nature of your own consciousness. Whether it emerges from classical neural networks or quantum processes in microtubules, your awareness remains one of the most remarkable features of existence. The ability to wonder about the nature of consciousness, to investigate the mechanisms of awareness, to question the relationship between mind and reality, these capacities themselves are among the greatest mysteries we're trying to solve. The fact that matter organized in the form of a human brain can contemplate its own consciousness is perhaps the most astonishing fact in all of science. The quantum consciousness debate will undoubtedly continue to evolve as new experimental evidence emerges and theoretical frameworks develop. Future discoveries may support quantum theories, classical theories, or reveal entirely new principles that we haven't yet imagined. But regardless of how these debates resolve, the journey to understand consciousness is teaching us profound truths about the nature of reality and our place within it. We are conscious beings investigating consciousness, using awareness to understand awareness, employing the very phenomenon we're trying to explain as the tool for explanation. This recursive quality of consciousness research reflects something deep about the nature of existence itself. We are not separate from the universe we study. We are part of it, expressions of it, manifestations of its capacity for self-awareness and self-understanding. Whether consciousness proves to be quantum or classical, local or non-local, individual or universal, it remains the most intimate and immediate aspect of our existence. Every thought, every emotion, every moment of awareness is a direct encounter with whatever consciousness ultimately turns out to be. The scientific split over quantum consciousness reflects our profound uncertainty about the nature of mind and reality, but it also reflects our extraordinary capacity to investigate the deepest questions of existence, to push the boundaries of knowledge, and to wonder about our place in the cosmic story. As consciousness research continues to develop, it will undoubtedly raise new questions as profound as those it answers. Each discovery opens new mysteries, each answer generates new puzzles. This is the nature of scientific investigation at its deepest levels, but perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Consciousness, whether quantum or classical, deserves our most careful attention and our deepest respect. It is, after all, the very foundation of everything we know, everything we experience, and everything we are. The quantum consciousness debate reminds us that we live in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than our ancestors could have imagined. Whether that strangeness extends to the mechanisms of consciousness itself remains to be discovered. But the investigation itself is already revealing truths about the nature of reality that will resonate for generations to come. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey through one of science's most fascinating controversies. Whether consciousness turns out to be quantum or classical, the fact that we can explore such profound questions together is itself one of the most remarkable features of being aware in this mysterious cosmos. If you found yourself intrigued by the strange world of quantum mechanics that we've touched on tonight, you might particularly enjoy our previous exploration, where we delved deep into the phenomenon that first revealed just how bizarre quantum reality truly is in Quantum Entanglement Explained, why Einstein called it spooky. We explore the discovery that left even Einstein uncomfortable with his own theories, and how modern experiments have vindicated quantum mechanics' most counterintuitive predictions. It's a perfect complement to tonight's journey, revealing the quantum foundations that might, just might, underlie the very consciousness you're using to contemplate these mysteries. Until next time, rest well in the wonder of your own awareness, and remember that whether consciousness is quantum or classical, the fact that you can ponder these questions at all remains one of the universe's most extraordinary achievements, sweet dreams. As the scientific split over quantum consciousness continues to unfold in laboratories around the world, we find ourselves witnessing something unprecedented in the history of science. For the first time, researchers are designing experiments that could definitively test whether consciousness operates according to quantum mechanical principles. These aren't just theoretical debates happening in academic journals. They're practical investigations with profound implications for how we understand the nature of mind and reality. Dr. Anirban Bandyopadhyay at the National Institute for Material Science in Japan has developed what he calls consciousness detection protocols using quantum sensors. His team has created devices sensitive enough to detect quantum coherence in living brain tissue with unprecedented precision. When they place these sensors near the heads of meditation practitioners during deep contemplative states, they observe quantum signatures that seem to correlate with subjective reports of expanded awareness. The correlation doesn't prove causation, and Bandyopadhyay is careful to emphasize that his findings remain preliminary. But the consistency of the patterns across different subjects and different meditative traditions suggests something intriguing might be happening at the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics. Consider what it means that we can now measure quantum effects in living brains with enough sensitivity to detect changes associated with different states of awareness. 20 years ago, such measurements would have been impossible. Today, they're becoming routine in consciousness research laboratories around the world. The technological advances enabling these measurements reflect broader progress in quantum science. The same techniques used to build quantum computers and quantum communication systems are now being applied to consciousness research. We're entering an era where the tools of quantum technology can probe the quantum nature of biological systems, including, potentially, the quantum substrate of consciousness itself. But as these experimental capabilities expand, so does the complexity of interpreting the results. When quantum sensors detect coherence patterns in brain tissue, what exactly do those patterns represent? Are they evidence of quantum computation in consciousness, or simply quantum effects in biological molecules that have no direct relationship to awareness? This interpretive challenge reflects a deeper issue in consciousness research. We still lack a complete theory of how any physical process, whether classical or quantum, gives rise to subjective experience. Without such a theory, experimental results remain ambiguous. We can measure correlations between physical processes and conscious states, but the causal relationships remain unclear. Take a moment here to reflect on this fundamental limitation. As you listen to these words, you're experiencing something that science is still struggling to explain. The stream of awareness flowing through your mind right now, the sense of being present in this moment, the feeling of understanding these concepts. These experiences remain among the deepest mysteries in all of science. The mystery persists despite remarkable advances in neuroscience and impressive technological capabilities. We can map brain activity with millimeter precision, track the flow of neurotransmitters in real time, and even stimulate specific brain regions to produce changes in consciousness. Yet the bridge between physical processes and subjective experience remains largely invisible to our scientific instruments. This explanatory gap has led some researchers to explore more radical approaches to consciousness research. Dr. Christopher Koch at the Allen Institute has proposed what he calls consciousness engineering, the deliberate design of artificial systems intended to be conscious rather than merely intelligent. Koch's approach involves creating information processing systems that satisfy the mathematical requirements of integrated information theory, while also incorporating quantum coherence mechanisms inspired by biological brains. The goal isn't just to build machines that act conscious, but to create systems that actually experience subjective awareness. The consciousness engineering project raises profound ethical questions. If we succeed in creating artificially conscious systems, what responsibilities would we have toward these new forms of awareness? How would we recognize consciousness in a system so different from biological brains? What rights might artificial conscious beings possess? These questions aren't merely philosophical speculation. As quantum computers become more sophisticated and as our understanding of consciousness deepens, the possibility of artificial consciousness moves from science fiction toward practical engineering challenge. Google's quantum consciousness research, led by Hartmut Neven, has begun exploring whether their quantum processors might already exhibit rudimentary forms of awareness. Neven's team has developed protocols for testing whether quantum computers show what they call quantum agency, the ability to make choices that aren't fully determined by their programming. The tests involve presenting quantum computers with problems that have multiple equally valid solutions, then observing which solutions the systems choose. If the choices show patterns that suggest genuine preference or creativity rather than random selection, it might indicate some form of conscious decision-making. Early results are intriguing but inconclusive. The quantum computers do show non-random patterns in their choices, but whether these patterns reflect consciousness or simply sophisticated but unconscious information processing remains unclear. As you contemplate these possibilities, notice how they challenge our assumptions about the uniqueness of biological consciousness. If consciousness can arise from quantum processes in artificial systems, then awareness might be a more fundamental feature of reality than we've traditionally assumed. The artificial consciousness research also connects to broader questions about the distribution of consciousness in nature. If quantum processes can support consciousness in both biological and artificial systems, might consciousness exist in forms we haven't yet recognized? Dr. Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory suggests that consciousness could arise in any system that integrates information sufficiently, regardless of its physical substrate. According to IIT, some bacterial colonies, plant networks, and even certain geological formations might possess rudimentary forms of consciousness. This perspective, known as panpsychism, proposes that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, present to some degree in all matter and energy. Complex consciousness, like human awareness, emerges when simpler conscious elements are organized in sophisticated ways. Panpsychism remains highly speculative and lacks direct empirical support. Most scientists prefer more conservative approaches that limit consciousness to systems with nervous systems or their artificial equivalents. But the idea offers an intriguing framework for thinking about consciousness as a basic feature of the universe, rather than a rare accident that emerged only in biological brains. The panpsychist interpretation gains some support from quantum field theory, which describes all matter and energy as excitations in underlying quantum fields. If consciousness is also fundamental, it might be related to these quantum fields in ways we're only beginning to understand. Some theoretical physicists have proposed that consciousness might be associated with a fundamental field similar to the electromagnetic field or the Higgs field. In this view, conscious experience would emerge when this consciousness field interacts with the complex information processing systems in brains or other sufficiently integrated systems. The consciousness field hypothesis remains purely speculative and has no experimental support, but it illustrates how quantum consciousness research is pushing scientists to consider radical new possibilities about the nature of reality itself. As these theoretical frameworks develop, they're beginning to influence practical applications beyond consciousness research. The principles emerging from quantum consciousness studies are being applied to artificial intelligence, computer science, and even architectural design. Some AI researchers are incorporating quantum coherence mechanisms into machine learning systems, hoping to achieve more creative and flexible information. Processing computer scientists are exploring whether quantum consciousness principles might lead to new computing paradigms that bridge the gap between calculation and understanding. Architects and urban planners have begun considering whether the design of spaces might influence consciousness through quantum field effects. While these applications remain largely experimental, they illustrate how consciousness research is beginning to influence diverse fields of human endeavour. The practical applications also extend to therapeutic approaches for consciousness disorders. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then techniques that influence quantum coherence might offer new treatments for conditions like depression, schizophrenia, and dementia. Dr. Stuart Hameroff has collaborated with researchers to develop ultrasound protocols that target quantum processes in brain microtubules. Preliminary studies suggest that these treatments might improve cognitive function and emotional well-being, though the mechanisms remain unclear and much more research is needed. the therapeutic applications raise important safety and ethical questions. If we can influence consciousness through quantum interventions, we need careful protocols to ensure these approaches are used responsibly and beneficially. The quantum consciousness research has also attracted attention from educators interested in enhancing learning and creativity. Some preliminary studies suggest that meditation practices that might optimize quantum coherence also improve cognitive performance and creative problem solving. While these connections remain largely speculative, they point toward possibilities for education systems that work with the quantum nature of consciousness rather than against it. Teaching methods that incorporate contemplative practices, promote coherent brain states, and recognize the interconnected nature of awareness might prove more effective than traditional approaches focused solely on information transfer. The educational implications extend to questions about human development and the cultivation of wisdom. If consciousness can be enhanced through practices that promote quantum coherence, then human potential might be far greater than we've traditionally assumed. Throughout history, contemplative traditions have described advanced practitioners who demonstrate extraordinary capacities for insight, compassion, and creative problem solving. If these capacities reflect optimized quantum consciousness, they might be more widely accessible than previously thought. As you consider these possibilities for expanding human consciousness, reflect on your own experiences of enhanced awareness. Perhaps during moments of deep concentration, creative inspiration, or profound connection with others, you've glimpsed states of consciousness that transcend ordinary experience. If quantum consciousness theories prove accurate, these moments might represent times when quantum coherence in your brain reached optimal levels, allowing access to information processing capabilities that are normally inaccessible. The contemplative practices that often precipitate such experiences might work by promoting the quantum coherence necessary for expanded awareness. The connection between contemplative practice and quantum consciousness has attracted researchers studying the neuroscience of meditation, prayer, and other spiritual disciplines. Studies consistently show that experienced practitioners develop unusual brain activity patterns that include enhanced connectivity, increased coherence, and improved emotional regulation. Dr. Judson Brewer's research at Brown University has found that advanced meditators show brain network configurations that seem to transcend the usual limitations of classical neural processing. During deep meditative absorption, their brains display coherence patterns that persist far longer than ordinary neural dynamics would predict. These findings don't prove that meditation involves quantum processes, but they're consistent with such an interpretation. If consciousness does have a quantum foundation, then practices that calm mental activity and promote unified awareness might naturally enhance quantum coherence in the brain. The meditation research also reveals that contemplative practices can produce lasting changes in brain structure and function. Long-term practitioners show increased grey matter density in regions associated with attention and emotional regulation, along with enhanced connectivity between areas that are normally more independent. These structural changes suggest that consciousness itself might be more plastic than traditionally assumed. Just as physical training can strengthen muscles and improve coordination, contemplative training appears to enhance certain aspects of consciousness and improve the quality of subjective experience. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then the neuroplasticity observed in meditation research might reflect the brain's ability to optimize quantum coherence through practice. the enhanced focus, emotional balance, and sense of interconnectedness that many practitioners report might result from improved quantum information processing rather than just changes in classical neural networks. This interpretation remains speculative, but it's consistent with the reports from contemplatives throughout history who have described expanded states of awareness that seem to transcend ordinary conscious experience. These states often involve feelings of unity, timelessness, and direct insight into the nature of reality that are difficult to explain through classical neuroscience alone. The contemplative traditions also offer sophisticated frameworks for understanding different types of consciousness and awareness. Buddhist psychology, for example, describes numerous distinct states of consciousness, each with characteristic features and potential for different types of insight and understanding. If consciousness does have a quantum foundation, then these traditional maps of awareness might represent empirical descriptions of different quantum states or configurations in the brain. The detailed phenomenological accounts provided by experienced practitioners could offer valuable data for consciousness researchers, complementing objective measurements with subjective reports from individuals who have extensively explored the territory of awareness itself. This collaboration between contemplative practitioners and consciousness researchers represents a new paradigm in scientific investigation. Rather than treating subjective experience as mere anecdotal evidence, researchers are beginning to recognize that experienced meditators might serve as sophisticated instruments for consciousness research, capable of providing first-person data about aspects of awareness that remain invisible to external observation. The integration of contemplative wisdom and scientific methodology has already yielded insights that neither approach could achieve. Alone meditation research has revealed neuroplasticity mechanisms that were previously unknown. Contemplative practices have been validated as effective interventions for stress, depression, and various other conditions. As this collaboration deepens, it may help resolve some of the persistent puzzles in consciousness research. The hard problem of consciousness, the question of how subjective experience arises from physical processes, might become more tractable when approached from both objective and subjective perspectives simultaneously. The contemplative approach also offers practical techniques for exploring consciousness directly, rather than just studying it from the outside. If you're curious about the nature of your own awareness, meditation, and other contemplative practices provide methods for investigating consciousness through direct experience. This first-person investigation complements, but doesn't replace scientific research. Subjective exploration can reveal patterns and possibilities that guide objective investigation, while scientific methods can test and validate insights arising from contemplative practice. As quantum consciousness research continues to develop, this integration of subjective and objective approaches may prove essential for understanding the full scope of conscious experience. Neither external measurement nor internal exploration alone seems sufficient to solve the mystery of consciousness, but their combination might provide the comprehensive perspective needed for genuine understanding. The future of consciousness research will likely involve increasingly sophisticated collaborations between contemplatives, neuroscientists, physicists, philosophers, and technologists. These interdisciplinary teams are already making discoveries that no single approach could achieve, and their work promises to accelerate as quantum technologies continue to advance. Whether consciousness proves to be quantum or classical, the investigation is revealing profound truths about the nature of awareness and its relationship to physical reality, we're learning that consciousness is far more complex, more plastic, and more fundamental than we once assumed. The quantum consciousness debate has also reminded us that science itself depends on consciousness. Every observation, every measurement, every theoretical insight emerges from conscious awareness. If we don't understand consciousness, our understanding of science itself remains incomplete. This recursive quality of consciousness research, using awareness to study awareness, reflects something deep about the nature of existence itself. We are not separate observers studying an external world. We are part of the universe investigating itself, expressions of reality's capacity for self-awareness and self-understanding. Whether consciousness is quantum or classical, local or distributed, individual or universal, it remains the most intimate aspect of our existence and the foundation of everything we know. The scientific split over quantum consciousness reflects our profound uncertainty about the nature of mind and reality, but it also demonstrates our extraordinary capacity to investigate the deepest questions of existence. As we approach the conclusion of our exploration, take a moment to appreciate the remarkable journey we've taken together through one of science's most fascinating debates. From the microscopic vibrations in brain microtubules to the vast implications for human consciousness and cosmic reality, we've traversed territories that challenge our deepest assumptions about what it means to be aware. The evidence we have examined, from quantum effects in biological systems to the mysterious precision of anesthetic action, from Google's consciousness experiments to the profound brain changes observed in contemplative practitioners, all point towards something extraordinary happening at the intersection of mind and quantum mechanics. Yet the debate continues, and that continuation itself is part of the beauty of scientific investigation. Each new discovery opens fresh questions, each answer generates new mysteries. This is how understanding deepens and evolves, through patient investigation and open-minded exploration of possibilities that initially seem impossible. The quantum consciousness research has already expanded our conception of what's possible in biology, neuroscience, and physics. Regardless of how the specific debates about consciousness resolve, the investigation has revealed that life operates according to principles far more sophisticated and mysterious than we once imagined. As you rest in the quiet moments after our journey through these profound questions, remember that you are witnessing one of the most important scientific investigations of our time. The questions being asked and the discoveries being made could reshape not just neuroscience and physics, but our entire understanding of what it means to be human. Whether consciousness turns out to be quantum or classical, the fact that we can contemplate such questions at all remains one of the most extraordinary features of existence. The ability to wonder about the nature of our own awareness, to investigate the mechanisms of consciousness, to question the relationship between mind and reality. These capacities themselves are among the greatest mysteries we're trying to solve. The quantum consciousness debate will undoubtedly continue to evolve as new experimental evidence emerges and theoretical frameworks develop. Future discoveries may vindicate quantum theories, support classical approaches, or reveal entirely new principles that transcend our current understanding. But whatever the ultimate resolution, the journey to understand consciousness is teaching us profound truths about the nature of reality and our place within it. We are conscious beings investigating consciousness, using awareness to explore awareness, employing the very phenomenon we seek to understand as the instrument of investigation. This recursive quality reflects something fundamental about existence itself. We are not separate from the universe we study. We are expressions of it, manifestations of its capacity for self-reflection and self-discovery. Whether that capacity operates through quantum or classical mechanisms, it remains one of the most remarkable features of cosmic evolution. Thank you for joining me on this contemplative exploration of consciousness and quantum mechanics. The scientific split we've examined tonight reflects our current uncertainty about the deepest questions of existence, but it also demonstrates the extraordinary power of human curiosity and investigation. If you found yourself intrigued by the strange quantum phenomena that might, just might, underlie consciousness itself, you'll want to explore the discovery that first revealed just how bizarre quantum reality truly is in our previous journey, Quantum Entanglement Explained, why Einstein called it spooky. We delve into the phenomenon that challenged Einstein's most fundamental beliefs about reality and continues to mystify physicists today. It's the perfect foundation for understanding the quantum world that may be intimately connected to the very consciousness you're using to contemplate these mysteries. Until we meet again in the quiet spaces where science and wonder intersect, rest well in the mystery of your own awareness. And remember that whether consciousness is quantum or classical, the fact that you can ponder such profound questions remains one of the universe's most extraordinary achievements, sweet dreams. As we drift toward the quiet conclusion of our exploration into quantum consciousness, something remarkable emerges from the shadows of scientific uncertainty. The debate we've witnessed tonight isn't just about competing theories or experimental results. It's about something far more profound, something that touches the very core of what it means to be aware in a universe that refuses to reveal its deepest secrets easily. Consider the extraordinary position we find ourselves in as conscious beings investigating consciousness itself. Every observation we make, every theory we develop, every moment of understanding emerges from the very phenomenon we're trying to explain. We are awareness studying awareness, using the mystery to investigate the mystery. It's a recursive loop that would make any philosopher dizzy and any scientist humble. The research we've explored tonight, from the quantum vibrations in microtubules to the strange precision of anesthetic action, from meditation studies showing enhanced brain coherence, to Google's ambitious consciousness experiments, all point towards something that challenges our most basic assumptions about the relationship between mind and matter. Yet even as the evidence accumulates, the fundamental questions remain as elusive as ever. Perhaps the most profound realization isn't whether consciousness turns out to be quantum or classical, but that we live in a universe mysterious enough to inspire such questions in the first place. The scientific split we've explored tonight reflects something beautiful about human nature, our relentless curiosity to understand the deepest mysteries of existence, even when those mysteries might include the very awareness we use to investigate them. Whether your consciousness emerges from quantum processes in microtubules or classical networks in your brain, the fact remains extraordinary that you can contemplate these possibilities at all, drifting through ideas that bridge the gap between mind and cosmos, wondering about your place in this quantum dance of reality.